extent of the hurry virus. I know I've still got it, and my wife still has to remind me to slow down all the time. But individuals who have a bad case of the hurry virus, they're in trouble. Everything from sleeping poorly to losing their sex drive. But when whole cities are affected by the hurry virus, the effects are more complex and perhaps more serious. And we can identify 3 dimensions of health that are impacted by this constant quest for speed in the city. In our book, we identify 3 different dimensions of health, and we have a chapter on each of these. And we look at the consequences of the hurry virus for these types of health. I'll just give you some brief examples of how the hurry virus or our addiction to speed affects each of these. Starting with human health, you'll all be familiar with the facts on road deaths. It's a tragedy, 1.35 million road deaths globally per year. But that's not the whole story. Deaths from air pollution from cars is a major problem, and more Americans die from car pollution than from crashes. And that's in a country with a pretty poor road safety record. And surging obesity rates. Across nations, vehicle use correlates approximately 99% with obesity rates. The really important point is that as speeds increase, the consequences of the hurry virus for human health increase as well. The same thing for environmental health. Now, speed is a bad thing for the amount of energy that we use, which means it's a bad thing for increasing greenhouse gases and other impacts too, like heat island impacts and biodiversity loss through sprawl. And finally, there's economic health and how speed affects that. There's a huge burden of maintaining road infrastructure, and the United States is the extreme example of that, but other nations as well. There's greater financial costs for households if they rely on fast modes. And as Ben will know, in Melbourne, if you rely on the car as your main mode of transport, then your household is likely to spend about 10 times as much on transport than if you rely on walking, cycling and public transport. And there's also growing costs for local governments, for example, parking and traffic congestion and sprawl. Now, all of these negative impacts are exacerbated by speed. And the end result is that almost everybody is worse off in a more inequitable, unhealthy and economically deprived world. Now, if we just focus on the economics, Janet Sadik-Khan comes up with an interesting point. She says that cities that seize this moment, meaning the coronavirus epidemic, to reallocate space on their streets to make it easier for people to walk, bike and take public transport, will prosper after this pandemic and not simply recover from it. Now, on top of all that, speed doesn't even save us time, yet that was the whole idea behind the transport modelling and cost-benefit analysis. You speed up, it saves everyone's time. Doesn't work like that. Cities with more cars spend more time per day travelling than cities with more walking, cycling and public transport. High-speed cities spend more money on transport, which means the residents of those cities have to spend more time at work to earn that money. And high-speed travel increases distance and contributes to the closure of local schools and shops and services, so that we now have to travel further and faster to get to the places that used to be within walking distance. So we can argue quite confidently that speed steals our time, our money, and our health. So how can we respond to the hurry virus at the city level? We need to reduce the speed of motorised traffic, and we need to rearrange land uses to shorten trips to create more walkable environments. But in the short term, tactical urbanism can allow us to creatively and rapidly change things. And I'll show you a few examples of that you're no doubt familiar with. New or widened sidewalks, which take space from car lanes or parking. You've seen lots of that in cities throughout the world. Filtered permeability in residential neighbourhoods, allowing bicycles and pedestrians to walk through, but not cars. Opening whole streets for people by restricting or completely banning motorised traffic. And this next one I find really interesting, moving retail and dining into the streets. Now, this photo was taken in August in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's another photo of the same street. And I was interested to know what it looked like before the coronavirus. So this is 27th of August, 2020. The same place before COVID looked like that. And when you look at that picture there, you wonder, how could they waste so much space? I mean, the tactical urbanism makes much better use of that space. There is a however here, and that is that lasting change requires shaping the behaviours and values and cultures of both residents and policymakers, okay, not just short-term change. So we need a major shift in how we think about speed in cities. So we need to reverse that process that began 100 years ago. Now, what Rodney and I argue is that slow cities can be seen as an organising principle that can help make tactical urbanism initiatives stick and help us resist pressure from supporters of speed. Now, there is some bad news, and that is that many cities throughout the world have been unable to resist that pressure to return to normal as fast as possible. And once again, what's happened is that they prioritise speed over health and livability. So a typical progression is that there's lockdowns, everything slows down, the COVID rates go down, and then they start opening up again, speed up, and the COVID rates go back up again. I think we've established that the hurry virus is serious. It's also what we can call a wicked problem because it's very difficult to solve. It's based on complex and changing requirements with multiple stakeholders and diverse views. And the values involved are often moulded to suit the vested interest of powerful groups. But in a strange irony, COVID could help cure the hurry virus pandemic. And in an insightful reflection on the coronavirus, Arundhati Roy, who's a Booker Prize-winning novelist, described coronavirus as a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we've built for ourselves, a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. She goes on to encourage us to walk through this gateway lightly and not take our baggage with us. Be ready to imagine another world and be ready to fight for it. So I think she's got some really sound advice. The lockdowns promoted by COVID have allowed people around the world to experience elements of what a slow city might be like. Safer, quieter streets, space for people walking and cycling, cleaner air and the return of bird life and clearer skies, and children and families playing in local streets and meeting their neighbours. And now that they've seen the transformation with their own eyes and heard it with their own ears and breathed it with their own lungs, they can appreciate more personally what they've been losing bit by bit from a lifetime's pursuit of speed in the city. Far-fetched theory of what could happen in a future utopia. Now, it might seem that this altered perception is going to be a hard sell, because in a society that's been sold the value of speed, we associate slow with pejorative synonyms such as indolent and slothful. But slow can also mean calm, relaxed, and unhurried. And slowness in this sense is associated with a better quality of life for communities living more sustainable life. But the problem is not just that we've been brainwashed with the idea that faster is always better, but we're also told that we need more mobility, which is how far we can go in a given amount of time, when what we really want is more accessibility, how much we can get to in that time. And the research is really clear on this. Making destinations closer is a more effective way of improving accessibility than is increasing speed, which means that that doesn't work in increasing accessibility, and that does work. Now, in the high accessibility, low mobility, slow city, responses to the twin viruses of COVID-19 and hurry reinforce each other. For example, in our Slow Cities book, we discuss cities of 20-minute neighbourhoods where people can meet most of their daily needs within an 800-metre or 20-minute return walk from home. And such cities would undoubtedly reap the health, environmental and economic benefits of slowness. The advantages of 20-minute neighbourhoods include walkability, connection to employment, shopping, health, education and recreation in safe streets and spaces. Moreover, a city of these precincts would simplify dealing with a local COVID flare-up because precincts could be temporarily closed and isolated from